one favorite movie of 2015 is... Inside Out is a marvel in not just animation, but in storytelling in general. Not only is it my favorite movie of 2015, not only is it my favorite Pixar film, but it comes off to me as the one American animation production that matches up to the greatness of, say, a Studio Ghibli film. Everyone's been talking about how brilliant this film is, but what makes it so? What is it about this film that tugs at everyone's heartstrings when they least expected it? With all these questions and more, it was basically impossible for me to cram my whole opinion into a short description on my top 10 list, which is why today I've decided to dive deep into this flick and give it a more extensive review. So, with all that in mind, I'm CM Waters, and this is my review of Inside Out. In order to fully explain this film, I'll have to give some subtle but still informative spoilers, so just a heads up. The world that Pixar created exists inside the heads of every living being, including cats and dogs. It consists of a place in the head known as headquarters, where the 5 most basic emotions, joy, anger, fear, disgust, and sadness, all control the reactions of said being. Each reaction creates an orb known as a memory, each one color-coded to indicate which emotion was evoked. Most of these memories get stored in headquarters for the day, and once the day gets out, they get sent over to a labyrinth-like area known as long-term memory, where memories can either get sent back to headquarters as a refresher, or once they fade away, get dumped into a pit where they fade away forever. However, there's also a set of memories that come to define a person known as the core memories, each of which power up an island that represents a person's personality. Did you catch all that? Well, too bad, I'm moving on anyway. This whole world is presented to us through the mind of a little girl named Riley, primarily through the perspective of the emotion joy. As things start to progress, Joy manages to understand everyone's role in keeping Riley emotionally healthy. Her job is to keep Riley happy, keeping her energy and enthusiasm up no matter what. Anger is in charge of keeping things fair and allowing Riley to take disciplinary action when necessary. Fear keeps Riley cautious, thereby keeping her safe, and disgust makes sure that Riley's taste is in line by making sure she doesn't eat, drink, wear, or even look at anything she finds, well, disgusting. The only emotion Joy has a hard time understanding is sadness, and every time she attempts to do something in headquarters, Joy attempts to shut her out. This becomes even more difficult when Riley and her family move from their home in Minnesota to San Francisco, as every emotion except for Joy starts to act up more and more. This ends up creating a dispute between Joy and Sadness that leads the both of them, along with Riley's 5 core memories, to be sucked out of headquarters and into long-term memory, leaving anger, fear, and disgust to constantly try and fail to keep Riley happy, as Joy and Sadness attempt to make it back to headquarters. However, in order to do so, Joy has to learn to trust Sadness, which leads to her understanding her role. And this is the agenda that Pixar dives into deeply. We've seen many films where there's a dramatic breakdown from the character because of some unresolved conflict, only to be followed by a retort. But that's not the kind of question that Pixar is attempting to raise. The question is it okay to have that emotional breakdown? Is it okay to address that conflict? Is it okay to be sad? And Pixar's answer to this is that not only is it adequate, it's necessary. But why? Why is it okay to be down and droopy sometimes when we're constantly told to keep our chin up and be positive? Well, the first thing to understand is that Sadness never really reacts all that often until Riley's moved to Minnesota. As much as Joy attempted to keep Riley happy and see the positive in everything, in this case, Riley goes through a huge change and needs to confront the fact that there's a lot of pressure in this situation. And that leads to the most obvious answer to this question, that sadness is there for sentimentality. Without joy or sadness in headquarters, Riley ultimately relies on anger, disgust, and fear to get her through her days, which causes her to disconnect with her friends, her family, and everything she previously held close to her because she treats things that used to make her happy with anger. Ultimately, though, sadness ends up being the way she reconnects with her family, because she lets out her emotions and opens herself up to that sentimentality from her family. Joy tries so hard to keep Riley happy and positive, but even she, at some point, comes to admit that when there's a problem, it needs to be addressed. Hence why she, along with the other emotions, needs sadness. There's a little more to it, though, that I think a lot of people miss. First and foremost, throughout her journey back to headquarters, Joy notices that Sadness constantly spots danger throughout her path, while Joy constantly makes rash decisions based on what's in front of her, thinking it will have a positive outcome. You could make the argument, then, that sadness ties into our ability to spot problems. If we were joyous about everything, always optimistic, and always assured that things were going to go right, eventually the problems would overtake us because we weren't prepared for them. That's the conflict that Joy goes through, as she constantly throws herself into situations that block her path further and further, despite Sadness constantly warning her against it. But I think the thing that struck me the most happened towards the climax, where Riley makes a decision that disconnects her with her family to a point where the console at headquarters starts to fade away, not allowing fear, anger, or disgust, and probably not even joy for that matter, to make her feel anything. They all think it's because Joy's not in headquarters, and some might make the argument that it's because she doesn't have her core memories. But while that is true to a certain degree, I would make the argument that she has trouble connecting with her feelings because of a lack of sadness. Think about it. Sadness was supposed to turn what were originally happy core memories into sad memories, and when she wasn't able to, Riley started to grow detached. On top of that, ultimately, as much as the other emotions want Joy to fix Riley's detachment, it's sadness that ends up saving the day, allowing her to reconnect with her feelings. And that's when it hit me. Sadness is a necessary, vital emotion because it provides the one thing that all emotions rely on: sensitivity. In the same way that joy ties in with energy, fear ties in with caution, anger ties in with discipline, and disgust ties in with taste, sadness ties in with our ability to feel. And without sadness, we can't feel anything. We can't be happy if we don't know what makes us sad. We can't know what disgusts us if we don't know what we acknowledge as a problem. We wouldn't know what to be fearful about if we also didn't know what makes us sad. Some might make the argument that anger could be used as an indicator of problems, but at the same time a burst of anger isn't always the most favorable option over a softer expression of our dissatisfaction, as proven with Riley's actions. Without sadness, we would grow detached and emotionless because we couldn't acknowledge that we feel something is out of place in that sentimental manner. Pixar has this ability to take what many other animation studios would turn into lame, pandering schlock and turn it into a brilliant, complex story with a groundbreaking message. And Inside Out is the pinnacle of that creativity, a landmark in animation as well as brilliant in storytelling. I'm glad kids these days made it a big hit, and now it's destined to be a classic that people will remember for ages, making it, in my opinion, the most influential and, yes, emotionally powerful film of 2015. So this week, folks, I want to know what your favorite film of 2015 was, and if it wasn't Inside Out, what did you think made it better than Inside Out? Post your thoughts in the comments below. And as always, if you liked this video, be sure to rate it and share it with your friends. And don't forget to subscribe, as I'll have another review up next week.